She lost her husband and believed she could never love again. But an unexpected encounter with a former love rekindled the flame in her heart, changing everything. Discover how she dealt with the dilemma between a new love and the memory of her husband. Daisy, a 43-year-old woman, lived a full and happy life with her husband Nathan, with whom she had been married for over 20 years. They had a daughter, Claire, who was in college. Their family life was full of love, laughter, and unforgettable moments. Nathan was a caring and devoted man, and together they formed an enviable couple. On that sunny Sunday morning, Daisy and Nathan were in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Nathan, always playful, threw flour at Daisy while she tried to make pancakes. Claire, laughing, entered the kitchen and joined in the mess. The house was filled with laughter and the delicious smell of fresh pancakes. "You two are incorrigible," Daisy said, laughing as she tried to wipe the flour off her face. "That's why you love us," Nathan replied with a mischievous smile. He approached and gave Daisy a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Come on, Claire, help your mother set the table." After breakfast, they decided to spend the day at the local park. Nathan and Daisy walked hand in hand while Claire rode her bike. They talked about the future, Claire's plans for college, and their excitement for an upcoming family vacation. In the afternoon, they returned home and spent the rest of the day watching movies and playing board games. It was a simple routine but full of love and joy. Daisy often found herself thinking about how lucky she was to have such a wonderful family. That night, after Claire went to bed, Nathan and Daisy sat on the porch, looking at the stars. "I love you, Daisy," Nathan said, holding her hand. "I can't imagine my life without you." "I love you too, Nathan. We're so lucky to have each other," Daisy replied with a smile. They sat in silence for a few moments, just enjoying each other's company. It was in these quiet moments that Daisy felt the happiest and most fulfilled. She never imagined anything could change this happiness. Summer was coming to an end, and with it, the tranquility of Daisy's perfect life. On a gray Monday morning, Nathan left early for work, as he did every day. He kissed Daisy on the forehead while she was still asleep and whispered, "I love you," before leaving. Daisy murmured a sleepy response and turned over in bed, not knowing that would be the last moment she shared with her husband. Later that morning, Daisy was in the kitchen preparing lunch when the phone rang. It was a call from the local hospital. Her heart sank immediately, sensing that something terrible had happened. "Mrs. Cooper, this is St. Mary's Hospital. Your husband, Nathan, was in a serious car accident. He is in critical condition. Can you come to the hospital as soon as possible?" said the voice on the other end, filled with urgency. Daisy felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Trembling, she grabbed her car keys and drove hastily to the hospital, fear and anxiety swirling in her mind. When she arrived at the hospital, a doctor met her and led her to a private waiting room. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but your husband didn't survive his injuries," the doctor said with a grave expression. Daisy's world collapsed. She broke down in tears, unable to believe that Nathan was gone. Claire arrived shortly after, called by a family friend, and ran into her mother's arms. The two embraced, mourning their irreplaceable loss. The days that followed were a blur of pain and grief. Nathan's funeral was a somber ceremony, filled with friends and family trying to comfort Daisy and Claire. Daisy felt lost without Nathan. The pain of his absence was suffocating. Claire, though equally devastated, tried to be strong for her mother. Daisy spent months in a state of numbness, trying to find a way to move forward. Memories of Nathan were everywhere, from the sound of his laughter to the scent of his cologne on the pillows. Every little detail of the house reminded Daisy of the love she had lost. Claire was a pillar of strength for Daisy, reminding her that despite their loss, they still had each other. "Mom, we need to move on. Dad would want us to keep living," Claire said, holding Daisy's hand. Daisy knew Claire was right, but the void left by Nathan was immense. Over time, she began to try to rebuild her life, one day at a time, carrying Nathan's memory in her heart as she faced an uncertain future without him. After Nathan's death, Daisy found herself lost in a world that seemed empty without him. The first few months were especially difficult, with the pain of Nathan's absence weighing on her every moment. However, with Claire's constant support, Daisy slowly began to find a new routine. Daisy dedicated herself to work and supporting Claire, who was still in college. The house, though full of memories of Nathan, became a refuge where Daisy could connect with the happy memories they had shared. She kept the house immaculate, a reflection of her attempt to maintain a sense of order amidst the emotional chaos. One thing Daisy never did was take off her wedding ring. The ring was a symbol of the eternal love she had for Nathan, and even after his death, she couldn't imagine herself without it. Every time she looked at the ring, she felt connected to him, as if a part of him was still with her. Over time, friends and colleagues tried to encourage her to move on and meet new people. "Daisy, you're young and beautiful. Nathan wouldn't want you to be alone forever," some friends said. But Daisy always dismissed any attempts at romantic relationships. "Nathan was the love of my life. I'm not ready to move on," she replied with a sad smile. There were moments of peace, small moments when Daisy could feel a spark of happiness. She started gardening, an activity Nathan loved, and found comfort in nature. She spent long hours tending to the flowers, feeling closer to Nathan as she worked in the earth he so loved. Despite her efforts, the nights were still lonely and difficult. She often dreamed of Nathan, reliving happy memories and waking up with a bittersweet sense of loss and love. Claire, now married with children, visited frequently, bringing joy and life to the house. "Mom, you're doing a great job. Dad would be proud of you." Claire always tried to cheer her mother up. In the years that followed, Daisy managed to find a balance. She learned to live with the pain of loss, keeping Nathan's memory alive in her heart. She knew he would always be a part of her, no matter what the future held. It was a sunny, warm afternoon, and Daisy decided to go for a walk in the park. The park was a special place for her, full of memories of walks with Nathan and Claire. As she walked along the tree-lined paths, she breathed in the fresh air and lost herself in her thoughts. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar face sitting on a bench near the lake. Her eyes widened as she recognized Steve, her old high school love. He was absorbed in a book but looked almost exactly as Daisy remembered, just more mature and with a few more lines of expression. "Steve," she called out hesitantly, but with a smile forming on her face. Steve looked up, and his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Daisy? I can't believe it." He quickly stood up and went to meet her, both of them hugging enthusiastically. "It's so good to see you after all these years," Daisy said, feeling a wave of nostalgia. "Are you back in town?" "Yes," Steve replied, smiling. "I moved back a few years ago. I got divorced, and my daughter went to study in London. With no reason to stay in New York, I decided to return to the city where I grew up." Daisy nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry about your divorce. It must have been tough." Steve shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "It was a difficult time, but I'm okay now. And you? How's married life?" His eyes fixed on the ring on Daisy's finger. Daisy took a deep breath, preparing to share her story. "I lost Nathan many years ago in an accident. I still wear the ring as a reminder of the good life we shared." Steve seemed genuinely moved. "I'm so sorry, Daisy. I had no idea." "Thank you," she said with a sad smile. "My daughter, Claire, has been a great help. She's married now and has wonderful children. I spend a lot of time with them, which brings me a lot of joy." As they continued walking through the park, they passed an ice cream stand. Steve looked at Daisy with a mischievous smile. Do you still like strawberry ice cream with chocolate sauce? Daisy laughed, surprised he remembered. How do you remember that? Some things you never forget, he said, smiling at her. How about an ice cream to remember the old times? I'd love that, Daisy replied, feeling light and joyful. They bought a large strawberry ice cream with chocolate sauce and sat on a bench under the shade of a tree, sharing the ice cream and laughing about their teenage memories. The interaction was natural and full of affection, as if the years of separation hadn't erased the connection they shared. Do you still remember that prom night? Steve asked, laughing. You looked stunning in that blue dress. Daisy smiled, her eyes sparkling with memories. And you were so awkward in your suit, trying not to step on my feet while we danced. And failing miserably, Steve added, laughing. It was a memorable night. Time passed quickly as they talked, laughed, and reminisced about the old times. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Daisy felt a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in many years. It was really good to see you, Steve, Daisy said a bit hesitantly. I'd like to keep in touch. Of course, Steve replied with a smile. I'd love that. Daisy took a pen from her purse and wrote her number on the ice cream napkin, feeling her heart beat faster. Here's my number. Call me whenever you want to talk or have another ice cream. Sure, Steve said, keeping the napkin with a smile. I'll love that. They said goodbye with a warm hug, and as Daisy walked away, she felt more alive than she had in many years. What did I do? He'll think I'm interested, she thought, feeling old passions reignite, but also an internal conflict. The next morning, Daisy was in a good mood. She felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Claire, who was visiting with her children, immediately noticed the difference. Mom, you seem especially happy today. What happened? Claire asked, curious as she helped prepare breakfast. Daisy smiled, trying to seem casual. Yesterday, I ran into an old friend from high school, Steve. It had been so long since I last saw him. It was a pleasant surprise. Claire looked at her mother with a mischievous smile. Oh, now I understand. I know that smile well, Mom. It's not just nostalgia. Daisy shook her head, laughing. Don't be silly, Claire. It was just a meeting with an old friend. Nothing more. Sure, Claire replied, not entirely convinced. But just for the record, there's no problem if it is more than that. You deserve to be happy, Daisy sighed, still trying to process the conflicting feelings inside her. I know, dear, but I'm not ready for that. Not yet. Later that day, while tending to the garden, Daisy reflected on her reunion with Steve. She felt a mix of joy and guilt. Steve's affection and attention had awakened something in her, but Nathan's memory and the love they shared were still very present. That night, while relaxing on the couch with a book, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Steve. Her heart raced as she opened the message. It was great to see you yesterday, Daisy. How about meeting again tomorrow? Maybe for a coffee? Daisy felt a smile form on her lips. The idea of spending more time with Steve filled her with anticipation, but also doubts. After a few moments of reflection, she decided to respond. I'd love that, Steve. How about 10 a.m. at the cafe near the park? Steve replied almost immediately. Perfect. See you there. In the days that followed, Daisy and Steve began meeting regularly. They had coffee together, strolled through the park, and even visited places they frequented in their teenage years. Each meeting was filled with laughter, deep conversations, and a connection that seemed never to have disappeared. Despite the growing feelings, Daisy remained cautious. She constantly reminded herself of Nathan and the commitment they had to each other. Even so, she couldn't deny the happiness she felt in Steve's company. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Steve looked deeply into Daisy's eyes. You know, Daisy, I've always wondered what it would have been like if we had stayed together in high school. I've never been able to forget you." Daisy felt her heart tighten. "Steve, I've thought about that sometimes too. But life took us on different paths." "Yes, but now we're here," Steve said, holding Daisy's hand. "And I feel like this isn't by chance." Daisy looked at their intertwined hands and felt a wave of emotion. She was torn between loyalty to Nathan and the possibility of a new beginning with Steve. But one thing was certain: she couldn't keep ignoring her feelings. The days passed, and the connection between Daisy and Steve only grew stronger. Each meeting was a deeper dive into the memories of the past and the new discoveries of the present. Daisy felt a mixture of happiness and guilt, as if she were betraying Nathan's memory by allowing her feelings for Steve to grow. One afternoon, after an especially pleasant walk with Steve, Daisy returned home with a heavy heart. She knew she needed to resolve her feelings before they deepened further. She decided to talk to Claire, seeking advice and support. "Claire, can I talk to you?" Daisy asked, sitting in the living room while Claire played with her children. "Of course, Mom. What's going on?" Claire replied, noticing the seriousness in her mother's face. Daisy sighed deeply. "I've been spending a lot of time with Steve, and I can't deny that I'm starting to fall in love with him, but I feel terribly guilty. I feel like I'm betraying your father." Claire held her mother's hand and looked into her eyes with affection. "Mom, I know you still love Dad and always will, but that doesn't mean you can't love someone else too. Dad would want you to be happy." Daisy shook her head, tears starting to flow. "I made a promise, Claire. I promised that not even death would separate us. I don't know how I can move on without feeling like I'm breaking that promise." "You're not breaking any promise," Claire said softly. "You're honoring Dad's memory by living your life to the fullest. He would want to see you truly happy." Even with Claire's comforting words, Daisy still felt torn. She decided that she needed to end contact with Steve before the feelings became unbearable. She picked up the phone and sent a short but sincere message. "Steve, I need some time. I'm going through many conflicting feelings and don't want to hurt you. We need to stop meeting for a while." Steve replied quickly, clearly shaken. "Daisy, please don't do this. I understand it's difficult, but we can get through this together. I just want to see you happy." With tears in her eyes, Daisy turned off the phone. That night, as she tried to sleep, guilt and sadness consumed her. She tossed and turned in bed, thinking about the love she had for Nathan and the new love that was growing for Steve. When Daisy stopped responding, it was as if Steve's world had ended. He sat on the couch, staring at the phone, waiting for a response that never came. With a heavy sigh, he turned off the phone and let himself fall onto the bed, feeling an overwhelming emptiness. Steve, who had felt alive again after so many years, now found himself plunged into deep sadness. Reuniting with Daisy had rekindled a flame in him that he thought had extinguished forever. He felt like a teenager again, remembering the days when his feelings for her were pure and intense. In recent days, Steve had bought a commitment ring for Daisy. He wanted to ask her to be his girlfriend, as he had always wanted to do in high school but never had the courage. The idea of finally expressing his feelings and starting a new chapter together filled him with hope. As he prepared for bed, Steve looked at the ring on the dresser. The silver gleam of the ring seemed to mock his current situation. He lay down, trying to find solace in his memories, but the thought of losing Daisy again was unbearable. He felt lost, as if a part of him was disappearing. The uncertainty about the future and the pain of a possible goodbye consumed him. As sleep finally enveloped him, Steve clung to the hope that Daisy would change her mind and that somehow they would find a way to be together. Daisy fell asleep feeling divided and anguished about what was happening in her life. As guilt and confusion permeated her thoughts, she finally fell into a restless sleep. Then something surprising happened. Daisy had a vivid dream. In the dream, She was in a sunny field surrounded by flowers and a gentle breeze. Suddenly, she saw Nathan approaching with a warm and loving smile. "Nathan," she called out, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, my love. It's me," Nathan replied, hugging her tightly. "I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too," Daisy said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so confused, Nathan. I don't know what to do." Nathan held her by the shoulders, looking deeply into her eyes. "Daisy, you'll always be in my heart, just as I will be in yours. But you need to move on. You deserve to be happy. But I promised that not even death would separate us," Daisy whispered, her voice trembling. "And that promise is still true," Nathan said softly. "I will always be with you. But that doesn't mean you can't love again. Steve is a good person, and he can make you happy. I want you to give him a chance." Daisy woke up with her heart pounding. The dream felt so real, so tangible. She looked around the room, trying to catch her breath. Her eyes immediately went to the ring on her finger and then to a picture of Nathan beside the bed, the same smile she saw in the dream. As she held the picture, tears streamed down Daisy's face. She felt a warmth in her heart, as if Nathan was still there, guiding her. The next morning, she got up with a purpose. She picked up some fresh bread from the local bakery and drove to Claire's house. When she arrived, Daisy rang the doorbell and Claire answered, surprised by the early visit. "Mom, what are you doing here so early? Is everything okay?" Daisy smiled, trying to appear casual. "I brought fresh bread for breakfast. Can we talk for a bit?" Claire, sensing the seriousness in her mother's eyes, invited her in. They sat at the kitchen table, and Daisy began to talk about the dream she had the night before. "Claire, I dreamed about your father," Daisy began, her voice still trembling. "It felt so real. He was in a sunny field and looked so happy. He told me to move on, that I deserve to be happy. He wants me to give Steve a chance." Claire held her mother's hand, her eyes filled with understanding and emotion. "Mom, that's a sign. Dad always wanted to see you happy. If he told you that, it's because he knows Steve can make you happy too." Daisy hugged Claire, feeling the weight of her emotions lifted by her daughter's comforting words. "Thank you, Claire. You always know what to say." After breakfast, Daisy returned home, still reflecting on the dream and the conversation with Claire. When she arrived, she went into her bedroom and took off her wedding ring. She looked at it for a long moment, remembering all the happy moments she had with Nathan. Finally, she decided that she couldn't ignore what she felt any longer. She placed the ring next to Nathan's picture by the bed, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. She picked up the phone and sent a message to Steve. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." Feeling a weight lift off her shoulders, Daisy knew she was ready to take a new step in her life, keeping Nathan's memory alive in her heart but allowing herself to find happiness again. Steve was in his apartment, trying to distract himself with the TV when his phone vibrated. It was a message from Daisy. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." His heart raced. Without hesitation, he replied immediately. "Sure, how about at the park where we met?" He got ready quickly, choosing a light blue shirt and jeans. He took the ring he had bought and put it in his pocket, feeling the cold metal against his palm. His thoughts were in turmoil, but one emotion predominated: hope. As he walked through the streets, Steve felt like a young boy again. After all these years, he could hardly believe this was possible. Reuniting with his first love, the one he never had the chance to express his feelings for. Each step was a mix of anxiety and excitement as he imagined what it would be like to see her again. When he arrived at the park, Steve spotted Daisy from a distance, standing with her back to him, looking at the lake. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He approached slowly, each step bringing back memories of their teenage years. "Daisy," he called softly. Daisy turned around, and Steve saw the sadness in her eyes, a look of guilt for what she had almost lost. Before she could say anything, he knelt down, taking the ring out of his pocket. "Daisy, after all these years, would you be my girlfriend?" he asked, his voice full of emotion and hope. Time stood still for a second, and they both felt as if they had gone back decades. Daisy looked at him, surprised, and then a smile lit up her face. "Of course," she said, tears in her eyes. Steve stood up, and they hugged tightly, as if the whole world had disappeared around them. Finally, their lips met in a kiss full of love and longing, sealing the reunion of their souls. After a moment, Steve pulled back a bit, still holding Daisy's hand. "Let's celebrate with some ice cream," he said with a mischievous smile. "Strawberry with chocolate sauce." Daisy laughed, a sound that filled Steve's heart with joy. "My favorite," she said, still laughing. As they walked hand in hand towards the ice cream stand, Daisy felt that the explanations she had prepared were no longer necessary. At that moment, Steve's presence and the love they shared were all that mattered. A few months had passed since Daisy and Steve started their serious relationship. The love they shared blossomed quickly, turning into an exciting engagement. Before they knew it, they were planning their wedding, an event that promised to be the beginning of a new life together. The big day had finally arrived. The small and cozy church was decorated with white flowers and candles, creating a magical atmosphere. Friends and family began to gather, sharing smiles and laughter as they awaited the start of the ceremony. In the back of the church, Daisy was getting ready for the moment that would change her life forever. Claire was by her side, helping her adjust her wedding dress. Daisy looked at her reflection in the mirror, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "You look beautiful, Mom," Claire said with a loving smile. Daisy smiled back, moved. "Thank you, dear. I can't believe this day has finally arrived." Claire held Daisy's hand and looked into her eyes with affection. "I'm so happy for you, Mom. I'm sure everything will be perfect." Claire's words brought tears to Daisy's eyes. "I hope so, dear. I remember when you were getting ready for your wedding. You were so nervous and excited." Claire laughed softly. "And you were by my side the whole time, giving me strength. Now it's my turn to do the same for you." Daisy nodded, feeling comforted by her daughter's words. "That was a wonderful time. I was so proud of you, and today I feel the same. Thank you for always being by my side. You've always been there for me, Mom." "It's an honor to be able to repay that today," Claire said, moved. "Tracy and I will make sure everything is perfect." Daisy caressed Claire's face, feeling a deep and unconditional love. "I'm the luckiest mother in the world to have you by my side, Claire. Thank you for everything." Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the church, Steve was getting ready for the ceremony. He looked in the mirror, adjusting his tie and trying to contain his anxiety. The door opened softly, and his daughter Tracy entered the room. She was stunning in her bridesmaid dress, with a radiant smile on her face. "Dad, are you ready?" Tracy asked, her eyes sparkling. Steve took a deep breath and smiled. "I think so, dear. I'm a bit nervous but very happy." Tracy approached and adjusted her father's tie, giving him a loving hug. "You're going to be great, Dad. I'm so happy for you and Daisy. You both deserve all the happiness in the world." Steve looked at his daughter, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, dear. Your presence here means so much to me. Having you by my side today is an invaluable gift." Tracy smiled, moved. "I wouldn't miss this for anything. You and Daisy are perfect for each other. It's as if fate finally brought you together." Steve nodded, feeling more confident with his daughter's words. "Yes, it really does seem like everything has fit perfectly. And having you here supporting us makes everything even more special." Father and daughter shared a silent moment of understanding and love. Steve felt incredibly blessed to have Tracy by his side, sharing this journey with him. Finally, it was time for the ceremony to begin. The guests were all seated, murmuring in anticipation as soft music filled the air. Steve walked to the altar, accompanied by Tracy, and positioned himself, anxiously waiting for Daisy. Daisy, arm in arm with Claire, walked slowly down the aisle, feeling each step like a dream. The eyes of the guests were all on her, but her eyes were fixed on Steve, who was waiting for her at the altar. Steve watched Daisy walk towards him, feeling his heart race. She was stunning, and he felt like the luckiest man in the world. When Daisy finally reached the altar, Steve held her hands, and they exchanged a deep and meaningful look. The pastor began the ceremony, speaking about love, union, and the importance of moving forward even after losses. The words resonated deeply with everyone present, especially Daisy and Steve, who knew what it meant to find a new beginning after so many difficulties. When it was time for the vows, Daisy and Steve looked into each other's eyes, feeling the strength of the love they shared. Daisy began, her voice trembling with emotion. "Steve, you brought joy back into my life. I promise to love and honor you every moment we spend together. You are my gift from destiny, and I am grateful for every day we have." Steve held Daisy's hands tightly, feeling tears form in his eyes. "Daisy, you are the light that illuminated my life again. I promise to love and protect you always. You are my first and only love, and I am blessed to have you by my side." When the pastor asked Daisy if she accepted Steve as her lawful husband, something surprising happened. At the back of the church, she saw a glimpse of Nathan sitting in one of the pews, with a smile of happiness and consent. For a second, Daisy froze. She blinked, and Nathan had disappeared. She knew it was just her imagination, but she understood it as a sign that Nathan, wherever he was, blessed her decision to move on and be happy. The pastor, confused, repeated the question, "Do you accept Steve as your lawful husband?" "Yes," Daisy replied, tears of joy streaming down her face. The church erupted in applause as Daisy and Steve kissed, now officially husband and wife. The celebration that followed was joyous, full of laughter, dancing, and love. Daisy and Steve knew they had a lot of lost time to make up for, now finally together. Daisy and Steve lived a life full of joyous moments, always grateful for having found each other again. They never forgot the past but embraced the present and future with all their hearts, knowing that true love always finds a way. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.